Hello students, I am here today in the TV studios of AIOU to help you understand the fourth unit of your course, Educational Psychology. In our last two lectures, we discussed the concept of growth and development in children and adolescents in detail. Today we will look at the development of personality in them, the various theories of personality and how a teacher can help shape students' personality. Let's begin this lecture by looking at the concept of personality first. What is this thing we call personality? Consider the following definitions. What do they have in common? Personality is the dynamic organization within the individual of those psychophysical systems that determine his characteristics, behavior, and thought. The characteristics are blend of characteristics that make a person unique. Both definitions emphasize the uniqueness of the individual and consequently adopt an idiographic view. The idiographic view assumes that each person has a unique psychological structure and that some traits are possessed by only one person, and that there are times when it is impossible to compare one person with others. It tends to use case studies for information gathering. The nomothetic view, on the other hand, emphasizes comparability among individuals. This viewpoint sees trait as having the same psychological meaning in everyone. It tends to use self-report personality question, factor analysis, to understand an individual's personality. We will look at some of the most popular personality theories that can be used to understand the development of personality in children and adolescents. Let's begin by Carl Jung's theory of personality. Carl Jung's perspective on personality is quite insightful. He wrote that what appears to be random behavior is actually the result of differences in the way people prefer to use their mental capacities. Jung's theory on personality types shows the various behavioral patterns and attitude. Using the theory, you can delve deeper into your own mind and comprehend your thoughts and feelings. According to Jung, there are two mutually exclusive attitudes, extroversion and introversion. Each person seems to be energized more by either external world or the internal world. The introvert is more comfortable with the inner world of thoughts and feelings, so they will see the world in terms of how it affects them, while the extrovert feels more at home with the world of objects and other people, and is more concerned with the impact upon the world. Introverts are more comfortable living alone and being by themselves. They depend on their me time to recharge. They become immersed in their inner world and run the risk of losing touch with their surroundings or their outer world. They also tend to be introspective and keep their social circle limited. Extroverts, on the contrary, are actively involved in the world of people and things. They are socially active and more aware of what is going on around them. They like to be the part of groups, communities, and probable places where they get a chance to interact. The idea of being alone terrifies them, leaving them alienated from their inner selves. Let's talk about trait approach to personality. The trait approach to personality assumes that behavior is determined by relatively stable traits, which are the fundamental units of one's personality. Traits predispose one to act in a certain way, regardless of the situation. This means that traits should remain consistent across situation and over time, but may vary between individuals. Kettle developed a very influential model of personality. He argued that rather than understanding personality by looking at just 2 or 3 dimensions of behavior, it is very necessary to look at a much larger number of traits in order to get a complete picture of someone's personality. In experiment, Kettle collected data from a range of people through 3 different sources of data. L data, that is life record data such as school grades, absence from work, etc. Q data, this was a questionnaire assigned to rate an individual's personality. The T data, this is data from objects tested designed to tap into personality construct. Kettle analyzed the T data and Q data using a mathematical technique called factor analysis to look at which type of behavior tended to be grouped together in the same people. He identified 16 personality traits or factors common to all people. Kettle made a distinction between source and surface trait. Surface traits are very obvious and can be easily identified by other people, whereas source traits are less visible to other people and appear to underlie several different aspects of behavior. Kettle regarded source traits as more important in describing personality than surface traits. Dear students, let's talk about I-Sync personality theory. I-Sync developed another very important model of personality. Based on the results of factor analysis of responses on personality questionnaires, he identified 3 dimensions of personality: extraversion, neuroticism, and psychoticism. During 1940s, I-Sync was working at the Moseley Psychiatric Hospital in London. His job was to make an initial assessment of each patient before their mental disorder was diagnosed by a psychiatrist. Through this position, he compiled a list of questions about behavior, which he later applied to 700 soldiers who were being treated for neurotic disorder at the hospital. He found that soldiers' answers seemed to link naturally with one another, suggesting that there were a number of different personality traits which were being revealed by the soldiers' answers. He called these first-order personality traits. He used a technique called factor analysis. This technique reduces behavior to a number of factors which can be grouped together under separate headings called dimensions. I-Sync found that their behavior could be represented by 2 dimensions: introversion and extroversion, and neuroticism and stability. He called these second-order personality traits. According to I-Sync, the 2 dimensions of neuroticism, stable versus unstable, and introversion and extroversion, combine to form a variety of personality characteristics. Let's talk about psychoanalytic theory of Freud. Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic theory of personality argues that human behavior is the result of the interaction among three component parts of the mind: the ID, ego, and superego. This theory places greater emphasis on the role of unconscious psychological conflicts in shaping behavior and personality. According to Freud, our personality develops from interactions among what he proposed as the three fundamental structure of the human mind: the ID, ego, and superego. Conflict among these three structures in our efforts to find balance among what each of them desires determines how we behave and approach the world. What balance we strike in any situation determines how we will resolve the conflict between two overreaching behavioral tendencies: our biological aggression and pleasure-seeking drive versus our socialized internal control over these drives. Let's talk about the ID. The ID, the most primitive of three structures, is concerned with instant gratification of basic physical needs and urges. It operates entirely unconsciously. For example, if your ID walked past a stranger eating ice cream, it would most likely take the ice cream for itself. It does not know or care that it is rude to take something belonging to someone else. It would care only that you wanted the ice cream. Let's talk about the superego. The superego is concerned with the social rules and morals, similar to what many people call their conscience or their moral compass. It develops as a child learns what his or her culture consider right or wrong. If your superego walked past the same stranger, it would not take their ice cream because it would not know that this would be rude. However, if both your ID and superego were involved and your ID was strong enough to override your superego's concern, you would still take the ice cream, but afterward you would most likely feel guilt and shame over your actions. Let's talk about the ego. In contrast to instinctual ID and the moral superego, the ego is the rational, pragmatic part of our personality. It is less primitive than the ID and is partly conscious and partly unconscious. It is what Freud considered to be the self. Its job is to balance the demand of the ID and superego in the practical context of reality. So if you walked past a stranger with ice cream one more time, your ego would mediate the conflict between your ID, which says, I want that ice cream right now, and superego, which says it's wrong to take someone else's ice cream, and decide to go buy your own ice cream. While this may mean you have to wait 10 more minutes, which would frustrate your ID, your ego decided to make the sacrifice as part of the compromise, satisfying your need for ice cream while also avoiding an unpleasant social situation and potential feeling of shame. Let's talk about behavioristic theories. Human behavior is learned, thus all behavior can be unlearned and new behavior can learn in its place. Behaviorism is concerned primarily with the observable and measurable aspect of human behavior. Therefore, when behavior becomes unacceptable, they can be unlearned. Behaviorism views development as a continuous process in which children play a relatively passive role. It is also a general approach that is used in a variety of settings, including both clinical and educational. Behaviorists assume that the only things that are real are the things we can see and observe. We can't see the mind, the ID, or the unconscious, but we can see how people act, react, and behave. From behavior, we may be able to make inferences about the minds and the brain. but they are not the primary focus of the investigation. What people do, not what they think or feel, is the object of the study. Likewise, the behavioristic theory does not look to the mind or the brain to understand the cause of abnormal behavior. It assumes that behavior represents certain learned habits and attempts to determine how they are learned. Because behaviorists are not interested in the mind and its more rarefied equivalent such as psyche and soul, inferences about the conditions that maintain and reinforce human behavior can be made from the study of animal behavior. Animal research has provided a very important foundation for the behavioral approach. The behavioral research is interested in understanding the mechanism underlying the behavior of both normal individuals and with those with problems that might be referred as mental illness. When the behavioral model is applied to mental illness, it tends to be used for a wide variety of presenting problems. It is perhaps most effective in treating behavioral disorders and disorders of impulse control such as obesity or sexual problem. Let's talk about the role of a teacher in personality development. A teacher that provides the right encouragement and direction to his or her student can actually help them grow into fine young by imparting values such as perseverance, hard work, determination, and respect. Right from a child's toddler's days, his or her interaction with this parent-like figure begins and goes right into his or her adulthood. While the faces that interacts with him or her may change over the years, the role remains the same. Let's now see how a teacher can help shape the personality of a student. The role of a teacher in child's early year is that of a guide who leads them down new paths, a guide who walks beside them and keeps them safe from harm while letting them explore all the new things around them. Our teacher in a toddler's life is essentially a partner in their learning experience and is a person who encourages them to find their own answers and discovering the world that they live in. Once teachers have guided young toddlers to find their own voice in the next phase of a child's life, teacher can help them explore special interests or talents, which can have a great impact on their future development. At this tender age, children often look to their teachers as role models, and the qualities that a teacher demonstrates through their own behavior can affect a child later in life. Even the way a teacher communicates and expresses himself can be a big influence on child's behavior. This is also a stage when teacher can be firm with their students by setting boundaries for them on what is acceptable behavior and what is not. The student-teacher relationship is primarily on trust, guidance, and encouragement. As a child grows into young adult, a teacher often starts being a friend and confidant for the student. If a teacher majorly influences a student, he or she is likely to seek advice and counsel from him or her. Teachers shoulder the responsibility of breeding good citizens of tomorrow, but not only providing education, but also providing students with a chance to mold their future into a bright and promising one. Dear students, that's the end of today's lecture. I hope you understood the concept of development of personality, the various series of personality, and how a teacher can help shape a student's personality. Until next time, goodbye from the TV studios of AIOU. Hello students, I am here today in the TV studios of AIOU to help you understand the 5th unit of your course, Educational Psychology. So far, we have successfully covered the first 4 units and I hope your concepts based on them are clear. Today we will discuss the topics of human needs, its many types, and try to ascertain how should a teacher deal with the needs of his children in a classroom so as to bring the best out of his kids. Let's begin today's lecture by looking at the concept of human needs first. What are the human needs and how they are important to us? Humans need a number of essentials to survive. According to renowned psychologist Abraham Maslow and the conflict scholar John Burton, these essentials go beyond just food, water, and shelter. These include both physical and non-physical elements needed for human growth and development, as well as these things humans are innately driven to attain. For Maslow, needs are hierarchical in nature. That is, each need has a specific ranking or order of obtainment. Maslow's needs pyramid starts with the basic items of food, water, and shelter. These are followed by the needs for safety and security, then belonging or love, self-esteem, and finally, personal fulfillment. Burton and other needs theorists who have adopted Maslow's idea to conflict theory, however, perceive human needs in a different way. They see it as an emergent collection of human development essentials. Furthermore, they contend needs do not have a hierarchical order, rather needs are sought simultaneously in an intense and relentless manner. Needs theorists' list of human essentials include: safety and security is the need for structure, predictability, stability, and freedom from fear and anxiety. Love and belongingness is the need to be accepted by others and to have a strong personal ties with one's family, friend, and identity groups. Self-esteem is the need to be recognized by oneself and others as strong, competent, and capable. It also includes the need to know that one has some effect on her or his environment. Personal fulfillment is the need to reach one's potential in all areas of life. Identity goes beyond a psychological sense of self. Burton and other human needs theorists define identity as a sense of self in relation to outside world. Identity becomes a problem when one's identity is not recognized as legitimate, or when it is considered inferior or is threatened by others with different identifications. Cultural security is related to identity, the need for recognition of one's language, tradition, religion, cultural values, ideas, and concepts. Freedom is the condition of having no physical, political, or civil restraints, having the capacity to exercise choice in all aspects of one's life. Distributive justice is the need for the fair allocation of resources among all members of a community. Participation is the need to be able to actively partake and influence civil society. While these are the human essentials highlighted by needs theorists, Let's now take a look at the different kinds of human needs. According to Abraham Maslow, human needs are of 5 kinds: psychological needs, safety needs, social needs, esteem needs, and self-actualization needs. Abraham Maslow, a famous social scientist and a psychologist, developed a theory of motivation which is based on the hierarchy of needs. The basic assumption underlying this theory is that the behavior of individual is strongly driven by the urgency of need. For example, the individual would try to satisfy his strongest need first, and once it has been achieved, it would no longer motivate him. Hence, he would move higher to meet his other needs. According to him, there are 5 kinds of needs: safety, social, esteem, and self-actualization, as explained in this diagram. Now let's talk about these needs in detail. Psychological needs deal with the maintenance of the human body. This lowest category includes the most basic needs that are vital to survive, such as the need for water, air, food, and sleep. Maslow believed that these needs are the most instinctive needs because all needs become secondary until these needs are met. If we need water, then little else matters until we have something to drink. Safety and security needs are about keeping us safe from harm. These needs include shelter, job security, health, and safe environments. If a person does not feel safe in an environment, they will seek to find safety before they attempt to meet any higher level needs. These security needs are important for survival, but these are not as important as the basic psychological needs. Now we'll talk about social needs. Social needs advance our tribal nature. These are the needs for belonging, love, affection, as well as for relationship with family and friends and companionship. These needs are met through pleasing and fulfilling relationships with others. A pleasing and fulfilling relationship would imply acceptance by others. Having satisfied their basic psychological and security needs, people can seek relationship from which their needs for love and belonging can be met. Now we'll talk about esteem needs. After the more basic needs have been satisfied, esteem needs becomes important to an individual. Once an individual have satisfactorily met their needs for love and belonging, they can begin to develop positive feelings of self-worth and self-esteem. Esteem needs are for a higher position within a group and act to foster pride in their work and in themselves as individuals. These needs include self-esteem, respect, achievement, confidence, recognition, and accomplishment. Now we'll talk about self-actualization needs. Self-actualization is the highest level of Maslow's hierarchy. This level of need pertains to what a person's full potential is and realizing that potential. What a man can be, he must be, is the basis for the perceived need for self-actualization. Maslow describes this as the desire to become everything that one is capable of becoming. Now we'll talk about the characteristics of self-actualized people. Although we are all theoretically capable of self-actualizing, most of us will not do so or only to a limited degree. Maslow estimated that only 2% of people will reach the state of self-actualization. He was particularly interested in the characteristics of people whom he considered to have achieved their potential as persons. By studying 18 people he considered to be self-actualized, Maslow identified 15 characteristics of a self-actualized persons. They include: They perceive reality efficiently and can tolerate uncertainty. Accept themselves and others for what they are. Spontaneous in thought and actions. Problem-centered. Unusual sense of humor. Able to look at life objectively. Highly creative. Resistant to inculturation but not purposely unconventional. Concerned for the welfare of humanity. Capable of deep appreciation of basic life experience. Establish deep satisfaction, interpersonal relationship with a few people. Peak experiences, need for privacy, democratic attitude, and strong moral and ethical standards. Now we'll talk about behavior leading to self-actualization. It is not necessary to display all 15 characteristics to become self-actualized, and not only self-actualized people will display them. Maslow did not equate self-actualization with perfection. Self-actualization merely involves achieving one's potential. Thus, someone can be silly, wasteful, vain, impolite, and still self-actualized. Let's now take a look at the few behaviors that, according to Maslow, lead to self-actualization. Experiencing life like a child with full absorption and concentration. Trying new things instead of sticking to safe paths. Listening to your own feelings in evaluating experiences instead of voice of tradition, authority, or majority. Avoiding pretense and being honest. Being prepared to be unpopular if your views do not coincide with those of the majority. Take responsibility and working hard. Trying to identify your defenses and having the courage to give them up. Thus, in a nutshell, Maslow's need hierarchy theory emphasized three basic ingredients. A man is a social animal and he always desires for more and more. His needs are of many types. There is a hierarchy of these needs. For example, these needs are arranged in a series of preference. After the lower level needs are satisfied, the needs for the higher level take their place. A man whose stomach is full becomes conscious of the other needs. A satisfied need can never work as a motivator. Only those needs which are not satisfied act as a motivator for influencing the human behavior. Now we'll talk about needs and interests. Whereas needs most refer to the sort of things we tend to desire as ends, and at least is the most obvious cases our well-being depends on having them. Interests seem to refer not only to objects of human needs, but also to the things that seems reliably related to them as means to end. Thus, we have an interest in transportation, even if transportation is not desirable as an end, because, let us suppose, all by itself it does not meet a vital human need, but because as a means it enables us to better achieve our ends or fulfill our vital needs. If we have a right to the objects of our vital human needs, then we also have a right to at least some means that could enable us to satisfy our human needs. What are human interests? Individual human interests are in some ways constant, in other ways variable. Certainly, they vary with changes in the health, strength, knowledge, and moral development of the individual. Healthy people have a smaller interest in medical care than those who are chronically ill. Stronger people have a smaller interest in assistance in moving furniture than weaker people. Those with greater knowledge can solve problems and relate new facts to pre-existing information better than those with less. Arguably, a person is the last years of their probable lifespan have an interest that is less pressing in younger people in reflection of their lives as a whole, and asking about how their lives relating to the ongoing streams of generations. There are changes in interest across the generations because technological changes and ecological problem depending on them, bringing different problem to the fore for different generations. Nevertheless, human interest, although diverse, have a remarkable constant range down the ages. What are unhealthy human interests? Most people will agree that there is a difference between what one can take a healthy interest in and what one could call a preserve or unhealthy interest. It is clear that not everyone will agree where we should draw the line, but most people will want to draw the line somewhere. For most of us, an interest in pedophilia would be on the unhealthy side of the line, as would as interest in amassing all the world's resources in one's hand, so that everybody else would have to grovel before one in order to receive barely enough for survival. These unhealthy preferences correspond pretty closely to what is known as moral vice, bad habits associated with inappropriate desires, and in most, if not all cases, associated with an ability to respect one's fellow human beings as person. Lastly, we shall now examine the importance of identifying and coping with the needs of children in a classroom. Maslow's hierarchy of need theory has made a major contribution to teaching and classroom management in schools. Rather than reducing behavior to a response in the environment, Maslow adopts a holistic approach to education and learning. Maslow looked at the entire physical, emotional, social, and intellectual qualities of an individual and how they impact on learning. Applications of Maslow's hierarchy theory to the work of the classroom teacher are obvious. Before a student's cognitive needs can be met, they must first fulfill their basic psychological needs. For example, a tired and a hungry student will find it difficult to focus on learning. Students need to feel emotionally and physically safe and accepted within the classroom to progress and reach their full potential. Maslow suggests students must be shown that they are valued and respected in the classroom, and the teacher should create a supportive environment. Students with a low self-esteem will not progress academically at an optimum rate until their self-esteem is strengthened. Dear students, I hope you have understood the concept of human needs, its types, and how a teacher should deal with the needs of his children in a classroom so as to bring the best out of his kids. Until next time, bye-bye from the TV studio of AIOU.